We now welcome our ASQA faculty for today's CQE session, Dr. bin Hassan. He is Managing Director, Healthcare and Technical Services, Engineering and Consultancy, that offers corporate and engineering-related consultancy to the healthcare industry. Dr. Hassan holds a degree in civil engineering from the University of Nottingham and master's degree in engineering business management from University of Warwick. He also has a PhD in biosciences and medical engineering from University Technology, Malaysia. With over 40 years of experience, he is on the committee of MSQH, which is the accrediting body for all hospitals in Malaysia. Previous positions include that of Chief Operating Officer for KPJ Healthcare Berhad. I welcome you, Dr. Hassan, on our panel today. From Kahong, we welcome you to this session, and we look forward to hearing you on a very important area, that's medical device adverse event investigations. Welcome once more, and I hand over the floor to you.
Thank you, Dr. Sudeshna. Okay. The adverse event, medical device adverse event. Okay. Basically, I'm going to talk in relationship to what are the experience that Malaysian have undergone, and of course, on this under Malaysia, we have the authority under Medical Device Authority, which is will view for any adverse event. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide, control. Can I have okay, can I have the next slide? Okay, this is my who am I, and I think a lot of words has been mentioned, so we skip this. Next, please. Okay, as an introduction, as I said, I'm going to talk. No, the one before that, please. Before that, I'm just going to talk anyway. It's okay. I'm going to talk about from the context of Malaysia. What we have this Medical Device Authority, and then act which govern it is under the Medical Device Act, the 737, which says that is what are the mandatory responsibility of each establishment. That means the one who manufacturer to provide investigation report, second to carry out corrective or preventive action, and basically establishment must submit a mandatory report in order to determine FSCA, that is field safety corrective action is required. Next, please. So under this, next slide, please. Actually, under this, this mandatory problem reporting is part of post-marketing risk assessment. It is there to measure that the continued safe use of medical device, and is an important part of the post-market surveillance system. The mandatory problem reporting is also referred as adverse event reporting in ASEAN Medical Device Directive, AMDD, and the objective is basically to improve the protection of the health and safety of patients. Okay, and actually under this act, the requirement says that it's mandatory problem to report to the authority when there is an incident which under the medical device which has occurred, and then this report is basically to determine the root cause of the incident, what are the corrective and preventive action to eliminate or reduce the risk. As you can see from this slide, actually under this medical device registration, it governs the medical device registration, IVD registration, license holder, medical device classification, but the most important is the last part, post-market surveillance, where it is the Medical Device Authority implement the medical device duties and obligation, incorporating guideline for adverse event reporting. Next slide, please. Okay, the type of biomedical, as far as in Malaysian context, there are 4 types of medical device: the diagnostic, laboratory equipment, we have the therapeutic, and also radiology equipment. These are some of the slides, show some of the example. I don't have to go through it. You all probably have known this very well. Next. Next slide, please. Okay, under the risk-based classification is divided basically A, B, C, D. We're starting with the A with the low risk, and some of the example are there: surgical retractor, tongue depressor, right up to B, low moderate risk, the hypodermic needle. C, like the long ventilator, is a moderate high risk, and lastly the D, high risk equipment, which is can be termed as heart valves or implantable defibrillator. So these are the high risk classification of medical device. And other than that, there are 3 classes, but this is more of electric shock classification. So this is, I do not want to dwell on this. Next slide, please. Okay, the degree of protection against electric shock, this is another part of it. I think we all know that. There are 3 types. The B, which are X-ray machine, MRI scanner. For BF is blood pressure monitor, and CF defibrillator or dialysis machine, which is more critical when it this type of equipment for the protection against electric shock. Next slide, please. Okay, general requirement for mandatory problem reporting is essential that the user or the healthcare professional should be consulted before any reporting is being done by the manufacturer. User or healthcare professional or medical device should be vigilant if there's any changes in the trend or the frequency of occurrence. How does the trend pick up? Is it more? Is it less? Probably if it is more, then you have to report it. But if it is just one-off, probably you don't have that. The act of reporting an incident to the authority, it must be important to inform the manufacturer that it's not construed as an admission of liability. If it becomes an admission liability, then we are not encouraging reporting. So it is good that any incident report, it will not be construed as admission of liability. And then the other thing is placing in the market a particular model of medical device. The manufacturer posts market surveillance or vigilant obligation. So it's important that they have to do this under the Medical Device Act in Malaysian context. But I think it's similarly, it goes to the other country as well, especially the Asian country. Most of them have this acts in place, or at least the guideline in place for them to receive mandatory problem reporting or adverse event. Next. Okay, in terms of report keeping requirement for the mandatory problem reporting, under the complaint records distribution under IMDD, trying to compare IMDD, ASEAN Medical Device Directive and Malaysian Device Authority. In terms of useful life, it's the same. That means it's more than, it has to be kept at least more than 5 years. And under MMDD, the projected useful life of the medical device, it must be within 2 years after the medical device is shipped. And similarly for Malaysian Medical Device Authority, 2 years after the medical device is placed on the market, or 2 years after the medical device is shipped for the projected useful life. Next, please. Okay, the 3 criteria reportable adverse event, what are they? That means first thing is adverse event has occurred. That is important, that this must have occurred, then you have to report. Secondly, medical device is associated with adverse event or failure of the medical device. So that is the second one. It involves failure of the medical device, it becomes compulsory to report for the adverse event. And then the adverse event which led to the following outcomes. What are they? There is a potential serious injury threat to the public health, or there are deaths happen to the patient. These ones have to be reported. Even the third one, a serious deterioration in state of health suffered by the patients or person who used the medical device has to be reported. Then lastly, even if there's no death or serious injury, but there might be a probability that it might lead to death or serious injury, it has to be reported. So these are the 3 criteria for any manufacturer to report for any adverse event on the medical device. Next, please. Okay, what are the reporting timeline? Okay, when it is a serious threat to the public, then actually all adverse events should be reported immediately. But when it concerns serious threat to the public, not later than 48 hours, it must be reported. But when there is a serious deterioration in the state of health, which is less serious, then not later than 10 days. When the occasion is recurrent of which might lead to death or serious deterioration might lead, the probability of it happening is there, then it must be reported within 30 days. So the severity of the threat to public health is determined by the authority, the MDA, and decision will normally be made by the Ministry of Health. This is in the context of Malaysia, as I said. Again, it again applies to also some most of the Asian country. Next. Okay, in terms of recall medical equipment, all medical device should be recalled according to the classification of equipment. So what are the class 1? Class 1 is, again, I said is a high risk equipment. Reasonable probability will cause serious health consequence or even death. So it has to be reported within 48 hours before the recall is made. So it has to be. So what is the time required to recall? 48 hours, no less than 40 hours if the probability of serious health consequence is there. And if class 2, medium risk, that means we're talking about probability which will cause temporary reversible health consequence. There is a remote probability of serious injury. So this one, actually, they can recall it with no less than 3 days. And if class 3, which is of low risk medical device, the probability of any health consequence is very low, then it should be recalled within 5 days. Again, the severity of the threat to public health is determined by the authority, and decision normally will be by the ministry. Next. Okay, there are also conditions where reporting is not required. Okay, what are they? Example like a deficiency of device found by user prior to its use. Before it's being used, they found that there's some deficiency in the device. So example, the packaging of sterile single-use device is labeled as do not use if the package is open and damaged. So prior to use, they found that it has been damaged or it has been opened. So the device was not used. So there is no need for it to be reported. Secondly, if the service life or the shelf life on the medical device exceeded. So we see this is quite normal. There is an expiry date. So example is insufficient contact of defib pad to the patient who observed. And the patient could not be defib due to insufficient contact to the chest. So there was no contact by the defib pad on the patient's chest. So there's no need. So to report because the shelf life of the pad was labeled, but it seems that it has exceeded, although the shelf life has exceeded, but it has never been in contact to the patient. So there's no need to be reported, for it to be reported, okay? And the third one, protection against fault function correctly. Example, an infusion pump stopped due to malfunction, and it gave an appropriate alarm. So because of that, it was not being used. And there was no injury to anyone. So there is no need for it to be reported to the authority. So these are the conditions that it has not to be, it's not required to report to the authority. Next, please.
Dr. Hassan, sorry for interrupting this very interesting talk. If you can help wrap up in the next 2 minutes.
Yes, I'll try to wrap up within the next 2 minutes. Again, there are 3 conditions. The other 2 conditions are expected and foreseeable side effects. The 5th one, negligible likelihood of occurrence of death. So when it's negligible, you don't have to report. Next slide, please. I almost finished, I think. Yes, so this one, medical device. So OMM, provide maintenance personnel. Okay, this one, actually some of the other speakers have talked about this. Okay, next. These are the dimensions of proposed medical equipment management. Again, I think this also has been taken up and talked by the other speakers. And the rest of the slide is to show that these are the form that has to be done for the mandatory problem reporting. So I think these are the 3 slide forms. So I guess that's ends my talk today. I hope if there's any question, I can take up the question immediately or